Flight controllers, gonna go for landing. Retro.
No, I don't know.
Go. GNC.
Go.
Econ.
Go.
Control.
No.
Ninth Planet Audio.
Capcom, we're go for landing.
Go for landing, over.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Turek Books. So happy for you to join us. I'm so excited for our guest today. She's an editor for Taschen books. I think the official title that I've read is you're the sexy editor for Taschen
Sexy
books.
book editor.
Sexy book editor.
Don't want to mislead people. I wouldn't want to be bragging about my sexuality.
Okay,
Though I
fair
will,
enough.
if required.
Fair enough. And I just checked a book that is treasured in my household. I bought it for my wife for the holidays. Like every holiday, I buy her some coffee table type books, like nice high-end books. I think probably 5 years ago, the Ren Hang book.
Oh.
And you edited
Yeah.
that. I saw your name at the top. I go, oh, wow. So, yeah, your work is even that. Because that is one, if you don't know the book, a Chinese photographer, artist who died tragically young and took some of the most beautiful, creative, explicit photos I've ever come across.
Ren Hang was somebody who I pursued. I pursued him because interns in my office started saying, have you seen this guy's work? Have you seen his stuff online? And, you know, I get my inspiration from everywhere. And I look and I had been wanting somebody, an artist from China, for a long time because China is this enormous culture and so much of it is blocked from us. And when I would see nude work from Chinese photographers, it was usually just generic. It was copying Western styles. Ren Hang was not copying anyone. Maybe a little Terry Richardson feel, early Terry Richardson with the white walls. But I tried to contact him. I never got anything back. And then I got an email from one of his friends pitching a book. Ren's English is pretty much non-existent. So he just wasn't hearing from me. And also China is so cut off. They cannot communicate with the West except through often clandestine servers. And he was eager, I was eager. It was a wonderful collaboration. He came to LA and with his boyfriend, Jackie, and you know, we made the book. Unfortunately, Ren was living in a country that does not recognize homosexuality. He had been with his boyfriend for 8 years, but his parents were in the dark, and they had to keep their relationship so undercover, so on the down low. It was just a constant source of misery and depression for him. He was a very depressed, very angry person, but also appreciated symbolism. So as soon as the book came out and he had this beautiful book that represented his work, and I'm not going to say the book played a part in it, but he would go into extreme depressions during the Chinese winter. And the book was out. He had completed what he was doing. He was 29, and he jumped off the 29th floor of a building in a kind of symbolic suicide.
Wow.
And then the family wouldn't let us make another book, and they threw his boyfriend out of his home and took everything he had and made him homeless and accused him of turning their son into a homosexual while denying at the same time their son was a homosexual.
Heavy.
Yeah, some heavy shit.
Yeah. I mean, what a life.
Maybe we should talk about something even more heavy.
Yeah,
then.
I go, hey, welcome to the show. Now, can you tell me about the saddest relationship you've come across? But I have to bring it up because the work still lives and it's beautiful.
Yep.
And yeah, we can't always control things like our depression or whatever. And then if social factors are creating it or making it even worse or bringing out these hibernated things that maybe never would have even been brought out. But if we somehow are still able to create through all of that and what we make lives on even just to another conversation, how beautiful.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, let's go
Yeah, let's
into
talk
the
about books.
past. Let's go into the past. Let's go into my past and way back into the past that influenced me and my career direction in life. When I was 14 years old, I was very tall. I was the height I am now, which is 5'10". I was gawky. I had a weird name. Everything grew out of proportion on me. I was horribly bullied in school, and I spent a lot of time after school in the local library in Burien, Washington, especially in the reference book section, where you couldn't check books out, but I was just always fascinated by learning odd facts, things like that. And I found a book called Psychopathia Sexualis, and I was very interested in learning about sex as, a virgin teenager. And I opened this book up, and I think, if I recall correctly, the first thing I saw, I've marked it here. You see, I'm opening the book.
Yeah, you're using Post-it, kind of little Post-it notes.
The first thing, it's full of case studies, and then we'll talk to it. The first thing I saw was Case 116. L, age 37, clerk from tainted family, had his first erection at 5 years when he saw his bedfellow, an aged relative, put on his nightcap. The same thing occurred later when he saw an old servant put on her nightcap. Later, simply the idea of an old, ugly woman's head covered with a nightcap was sufficient to cause an erection.
Okay, and that was the first thing you saw.
I returned to the library day after day after day reading Psychopathia Sexualis at the age of 14. And not only was it jaw-dropping and fascinating to know that these things existed in 1877.
Wow.
But that there was a world of people weirder and more unacceptable to society than I was.
Comforting.
It was very comforting. And because I just went straight to the case studies, I didn't really know about it at that time. I didn't know much about the purpose, why it existed, even how old it was at that time. But this was a book by Richard Friedelin Joseph Freiherr Kraft von Festenberg auf Fronberg genannt von Ebbing.
Well, and you said you were getting made fun of for your weird name. How do you top that one?
Exactly, and I had a weird German name myself at the time. My
did.
name was Postnecker.
Okay, your last name?
Yeah.
Postnecker.
Which was easily turned into Nosepicker by the kids in the school.
Okay.
He was from a baronial family, Heidelberg. He became the director of the Styrian State Asylum in Graz, Austria, at age 33. He was right there at the beginning of the psychiatric revolution. All of this emerged in Austria, and we had Freud and all this, but there were many, many others.
Yeah.
And up until that time, crazy people had been treated with beating, bleeding, public humiliation, tying them to the wall, and somehow they realized it didn't work. It wasn't working on them. So they came up with the humane treatment where they just treated them as if they were normal. And that actually didn't work either.
Yeah.
So we had Darwin. We had the idea of heritable characteristics coming out, and suddenly the family taint, and that's not the area between your scrotum and your anus.
Okay.
The family taint became the cause of everything. It was all your parents' fault.
Okay.
Which
now
we
we're
know.
talking.
Yeah, we know.
Let's get into the good stuff.
And so Kraft Ebbing, young man, got a job in the asylum, and he started communicating with all the other people who were treating patients, and they started just looking for the weirdest ones of all and writing them up and kind of apologizing. The book is full of very florid language describing the horrors of these people, but at the same time putting it all down to the family.
Right.
You know,
Well, the nightcap thing is so interesting because it's like pre-graphic revolution. The things that humans found titillating could be so much more mild and mundane. Not that people don't get aroused by all kinds of things even today, but like an old servant putting on a nightcap, like what a simple gesture. What a seemingly innocuous gesture.
Well, you know, I went on then to become a pornographer.
Yes.
And my true success was Leg Show magazine, which was the biggest selling fetish magazine in the world, which I turned it into that. It was just kind of a wandering magazine that didn't have a direction at all when I took it over. But I took this history that I had, this compassion and this interest in just the oddest edges of it, and made this magazine. And the things that people wrote in then, their shameful fetishes, were nothing compared to what was going on in Austria back then. I mean, we have here, case 97, laborer was arrested because he had cut a large piece of skin from his left forearm with a pair of scissors in a public park. He confessed that for a long time he had been craving to eat a piece of the fine white skin of a maiden, and that for this purpose he had been lying in wait for such a victim with a pair of scissors. Oof. But as he had been unsuccessful, he desisted from this purpose and instead had cut his own skin.
If you can't eat somebody else, you might as well eat yourself.
Eat the one you love.
Yeah.
Of course, he
a
didn't
good
love
self-help
himself.
metaphor and all of that.
Oh yeah, this is just the things that people did and the things that people got away with, and the things that people did at very young ages back then. There's no match for it in current society.
Wow.
There is nothing.
And it's and you said you felt unburdened when you read this at 14 because you weren't living in the most open world where people discuss things like this. We still aren't, but we're maybe a little more. And then you went on to publish this magazine and would read other people's shame, and almost interesting how you kind of that's the one through line, is it kind of unburdening people.
Well, and I felt
like, hey, you're not the only one with weird thoughts.
Yeah, and
what we call weird.
I don't actually have weird sexual thoughts. I'm a very standard kind of heterosexual.
Sure.
But I had sympathy for these people. I understood their pain. I understood their struggles because I had been bullied and I'd been an outcast for other reasons.
Yeah. When did you get this copy of the book?
Oh,
You didn't. This isn't the library.
This
version.
isn't the library.
Okay,
I would never steal from a library. That is wrong, kids. No. Once eBay came along, eBay. When I discovered eBay, that was just the heavens opening, and delivering me manna. eBay has brought me so many things, but many books that are in my collection were introduced to me by other people's libraries.
Okay.
There was Adam Parfrey. I don't know if you know who he is. He had Feral Press, a press that published just the weirdest possible stuff.
Okay.
When people came to me through the years and said, I've written a book about, how I like to put things up my anus, and I've expanded my anus to a foot wide. I've written my memoir. I'm like, go to Adam Parfrey.
Feral Press.
Feral Press, he's dead now. But going over his library, I found many books that then I could hunt down myself.
Cool. So you're like actively taking notes when you're checking out other people's books.
Always.
So you have a pretty solid library.
I have a pretty solid
I mean, you're calling it a library.
library in certain areas.
Okay.
I certainly old sex books.
Cool.
I have a huge library of these. Most things, things that are published in English. There are a lot of things that I would love to have that were published only in German because the Germans and the Austrians were the pioneers of this. Medical books. My father was a naturopath and chiropractor and kind of bordering on, conspiracy theories and quackery.
Okay.
So I have a huge collection of old medical books, and particularly those that wander into quackery, and that often overlaps with sexuality.
Oh, interesting.
Because there's no quackery like sex quackery.
Okay.
In fact, after I read one more in here, we will get on to John Harvey Kellogg.
Okay.
Guy everyone loves.
I'm loving this already.
Case 180. And I know this is wrong to laugh, but the image of it. X, of high social position, led a dissolute life for some time and had epileptic attacks. And just a note, I believe that epilepsy was diagnosed differently then. There was a lot of shade thrown on epileptics, and I think a lot of these people were just suffering from syphilis of the brain or something. It wasn't true epilepsy as we know it. He became engaged. On his wedding day, shortly before the ceremony, he appeared on his brother's arm before the assembled guests. When he came before his bride, he exposed his genitals and began to masturbate. He was at once taken to an expert in mental disease. On the way, he constantly masturbated and for some days was actuated by this impulse, which gradually decreased in intensity. After the paroxysm, the patient had only a confused remembrance of the events, could give no explanation, and went on with his life.
Okay. Gradually decreased in intensity, as it does.
All right. And
wow. Yeah. So this guy masturbated on his wedding day.
He masturbated when he was brought in front. Yeah.
On his brother's arm.
To get married. Yeah.
Wow.
Brought up to the altar.
And he has no recollection of it after.
Yeah.
What a fascinating book. I mean,
amazing
treasure
book.
Trove.
You can buy a copy for $35.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not. It was a very, very widely distributed book. And
Psychopathia Sexualis.
Wonderful name. As I finally learned, it was Kraft von Ebbing, as he was normally known, testified in a lot of court cases. And so this book was kind of his explanation of everything that could also be used in court. Like in the case of X, some people do masturbate in front of their brides. And he was generally, though he condemned them in here, he was generally very sympathetic. And he got a lot of people off.
Like brief temporary insanity kind
Temporary
of stuff.
Insanity, yeah. Had no recollection.
Wow, okay.
Went on with his life.
This compendium of excuses almost.
Right.
But also just like these little glimpses into parts of the human brain that are often, like no one wants to talk about this outwardly in our world. So to be able to go that deep into these corners of the human brain over time too, it's actually like a incredibly poignant marker of our story as people.
And
and especially a part of our story that gets shelved.
I'm on social media. You're on social media. I see you there. I know you're there.
I'm just not on social media right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I see you there. What I see is so many people who believe that we're in the end times, that our society is more corrupt, more immoral, going to hell in the proverbial handbasket. And all of these books, everything that I see, all of my research shows me we're probably more controlled, more morally restricted than we have ever been. This isn't going on because everyone's going to know about it. You
Right.
know, if you masturbate at the altar in front of your bride, it's going to be all over the papers.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't get away with any of this stuff. You can't be cutting your skin off in a park without it being all over the headlines.
That's right.
We are
And even if it's-
constrained.
Even if no one has a camera on us, we feel the camera on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the ultimate sense of control. And maybe that's why people do feel so doom and gloom, because we are more restricted. You're saying we're better behaved and times are actually more civil than they've ever been. But within that civility, are we repressing more than we ever have? And is that a darkness that's growing collectively?
Well, we know that Gen Z is having less sex than any generation on record. And a big part, it's not that they're having less sex, they're only having sex with themselves. They, on average, kids begin watching online porn at 12 now. So right around puberty, they become trained to Pornhub and other, similar platforms where they can get anything, anything they want for free.
Yeah.
Absolutely free. The thing I made my living off of, it's not possible anymore. It's all free.
Right.
And
it's a fast food menu to their brain.
And so they have just involuted. They're not taking it to the park with their scissors. They are keeping it in their room, in their heads, and in their hand.
Right. Now, and then there's some happy medium between that and taking it to the park with their scissors. But yeah, so we've
it's called a relationship.
It's called another human being, potentially.
Yep.
Yeah. Go have a crush. Go have a crush on someone.
Go, and yes, now we expect that you're going to ask, may I, before you do this? And go ahead and ask. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
All you can do is get turned down.
Yeah. Be polite.
Yeah.
Like Diane said, may I? That's just a very polite way of
It's kind of fun. I kind of like it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's like its own sort of kink to the process.
Well, my boyfriend's 27. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's I like it.
So you're
Let's talk about the next guy, however, who actually published his book, one of the best-selling sex books available, one of the only sex books available in his time, Plain Facts About Sexuality by John Harvey Kellogg, published in 1877. Kellogg, and you recognize the name, it was his brother, not him, who invented the cornflakes, but he was the one who was head of the lunatic sanatorium where they were giving people enemas and this and that.
Well, and I keep hearing that the cornflakes were invented as a means of stifling sexuality. Like they were creating food to weaken people.
It was actually the thing that John Harvey invented was granola.
Okay.
And he was obsessed with the idea of keeping your bowels clean. And he was kind of right about this, that he was the first to pay a lot of attention to the biome and its relationship to health. But he was a Seventh-day Adventist. He had 2 years of primary school, age 9 and 11. Then he had to quit and go help his dad in the broom factory. He began writing articles, however, for Seventh-day Adventist magazines at age 12. He began teaching school with no education at age 16. He got a kind of benefactor who paid for a 6-month medical course when he was age 20 and then got him into University of Michigan Medical School, Bellevue Hospital Medical College, where he got a medical degree at age 23 with no education. Yeah, no education.
Was he really that brilliant, or was he that wealthy?
He was not wealthy at all. No, he was poor. No, it was common at that time for people to educate themselves.
Right.
I myself, I'm self-educated. I'm a high school dropout. So, all my education comes from the library and books.
Yeah.
And that was what he did. But He wrote this book, this big book about sex at age 25 as a virgin.
Okay. Well, that's why he's calling the facts plain.
They are very fancy, his facts.
Okay.
Very, very fancy. His writing is, the way we expect writing to be then. We have this one. The dance is the spur of lust, a circle of which the devil himself is the center. Many women that use it have come dishonest home, most indifferent, none better. It's the waltz. The waltz.
The waltz, the dance.
The waltz, yes. It ruined this woman's life. I am speaking openly and frankly, and when I say that I did not understand what I felt or what were the real and greatest pleasures I derived from this so-called dancing, I expect to be believed. But if my cheeks grew red with uncomprehended pleasure then, they grow pale with shame today when I think of it all. The physical emotions aroused by, yeah, this is a good one.
Of the waltz.
The waltz.
So that's a pretty tame dance by our standards, right?
Not then.
Not then.
Not then.
Yeah.
The waltz was considered a blasphemous corruption and, leading cause of
immorality.
Immorality in women.
Okay.
Yeah, women. Doesn't matter about the men.
Yeah. So he wrote this as a virgin. I mean, is the entirety of this book this sort of like anti-sexual kind of prude?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, spinal irritation.
And so how did you find this book?
Again, I knew about Kellogg.
Yeah.
Actually, I was living in, I had a weekend home in New Paltz, New York, upstate New York.
Yeah.
And they shot a film about Kellogg up there at the Mohonk Mountain House. Road to Wellville came out in 1994.
Okay.
And it premiered in the local theater, and everyone was invited for free. The whole town could come for free. And the movie turned out to be real scatological, and people were just horrified, covering their faces. A lot of the people had been extras, leaving the theater, and...
So was the movie like a rebellious commentary on this?
It was a
guy?
comedy.
It was a comedy.
It was a comedy, yeah.
That's the only thing you could do with this, or make it something very grave.
He was very popular. Famous people went to his sanatorium to be treated.
Really?
He invented a number of vibrating devices to help relieve people's stress. At the same time, remaining a lifelong virgin, he married, slept in separate bedrooms because he didn't want to kill his wife by doing this. He came up with lots of techniques to keep people from masturbating. He suggested carbolic acid be applied to the clitoris to keep women from doing it.
And yet he invented these vibrating machines. So somehow the machinery was okay. And this is all like Industrial Revolution age, as people are inventing these tools that further kind of embellish our bodies or detach us from them.
He also invented gynecological instruments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we just ate the Kellogg cereal every day under this family name.
Yeah, he believed that the best way to stop boys from masturbating was to circumcise them without anesthesia. And
I'm liking this guy less and less.
His final chapter is Quacks. The victims of self-abuse fall an easy prey to the hordes of harpies, fiends in human shape, who are ready at every turn to make capital out of their misfortunes. From no class of persons do quacks and charlatans derive so rich a harvest as from these erring ones.
Okay.
Dude.
Yeah.
Extracted his harvest. But,
so what's your takeaway from that book?
That it was written by a 25-year-old virgin at a time when people really genuinely believed that men were born with all the semen that they would ever have, and therefore they had to parse it out sparely.
Okay.
And if they used up all their semen, they would die. It was one of the big fluids, the main fluids of the body.
Wow.
And so there was no way to get more.
Why do you think all of this was so repressed? Was it to get people to behave and to get them, I mean, Industrial Revolution, take all that diverted libido and send it into the factory and work tirelessly to make other people rich, and then have religions enforce that? Is this a means of controlling the masses to capital's agenda?
Certainly Abrahamic religions have never been the friend of sex.
Yeah, and I'm not like putting anyone's religion down, but I mean, when you start to stifle your nature as a person, you do have to start to investigate, why is it happening?
There has never been more misinformation spread willfully about any other part of the body than the genitals. Though Kellogg in here does pass on the information that male and female lungs are different, that men tend to breathe from the bottom of their lungs, whereas women only breathe from the top of their lungs. And then, as almost an afterthought, he puts out there that possibly the corsets they're all bound into could have something to do with this. But it was accepted knowledge at the time. Yes, women only breathe from the top of their lungs, so it's perfectly fine to just bind them up in corsets.
As their midsections are cinched.
But we have, because I see we're running short of time, and we really have to get to the Atlas of Men. We really have to get to the Atlas of Men. Okay.
Okay. Tell me about it.
The Atlas of Men came after Varieties of Delinquent Youth by the same author. William Herbert Sheldon, who published this in 1954, Varieties of Delinquent Youth in 1944, he had degrees. This guy, degrees in psychology, University of Colorado, University of Chicago, MD from the University of Chicago Medical Center. He was director of the Constitutional Laboratory at the Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons. He came up with terms you may know: endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph. You know these terms?
I've maybe heard them, but no,
Yeah.
I couldn't give you a good definition.
Okay, they have been
Morph means maybe to change.
They have been accepted as scientific fact that there are three kinds of bodies.
Okay.
Tall, thin people who are
right.
ectomorphs, fat people who are endomorphs, and mesomorphs who are muscular people.
Okay.
And that everyone is some combination of these things. And he made a system of points, a point system, to determine exactly what proportion of these people had.
Like a BuzzFeed quiz.
And then he based their personalities. He believed that this formed their personalities.
The body type, the
Yeah.
way you
Yeah,
physically move through the world dictates your behaviors.
And it was so accepted, probably because, he had great education and everything.
Well,
it
and
was
it's a simple solution. People love simple solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. Palmistry, horoscopes. So he was allowed to photograph and measure all incoming freshmen at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, University of Pennsylvania, and all the Seven Sisters colleges naked
Okay.
from the 1940s into the 1970s.
No kidding. So when kids got accepted into Harvard, it was under the condition that they get naked for this doctor?
Uh-huh. And they were
Okay.
photographed front, back, and side.
Wow.
These included George Bush, Brandon Tartikoff, Bob Woodward, Meryl Streep, and Hillary Rodham.
No kidding.
They were all photographed naked for what were called posture studies.
Okay.
This is what he passed it off as.
It's like a physical, probably when they enter the college, they give them their physical and do the posture studies.
Do the posture studies.
Study.
He, Aldous Huxley was a big fan of his work.
Okay.
Well, he turned out to be a hardcore, Nazi eugenicist.
Yeah.
And he
So this Atlas of Men.
he produced this book, and many of these Ivy League people are in this book. Pages.
No way.
And pages.
You can't see their faces,
And
you can't see
pages.
their front.
But here is how he describes each group. He has divided them up into their somatotypes,
Oh, boy.
which he has figured out,
Okay.
Okay. Great cats. He has divided them all up into animal groups. Endomorphic extreme mesomorphy of extreme ectopenia jaguars, shorter-legged and heavier-bodied cats than the cougar or leopard, most ectopenic and most powerful of the North American big cats. And
So sorry. Elizabeth, are you picking up the volume even as she reads?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little quieter.
Okay.
but if
Okay.
you
It's still working.
Yeah, I'm talking to the mic a bit. But
Cool.
Yeah, it's fine.
okay.
So sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
I know. It's all right. Maybe let me put the book on this side.
Yeah. So he's out here arranging people into animals and categories.
Uh-huh.
And this worked through some of the mightiest institutions in our country, right?
And amazingly, this book did not come out. This book of all these naked men, where he is describing them as animals, did not ruin his career. He was at the height of his career, and this was accepted as a medical book.
In like the 60s, 70s?
50s,
okay.
yeah. But
Unreal.
they could have gone back, and after I got this, and this is a book, I saw it in somebody else's library, went through it as we were all sitting around smoking weed, and I'm like, oh, I've got to have this
This is
book.
fascinatingly disturbing.
Yep, went and hunted it down, found my own copy, and then I looked, started researching. When the internet came along, you can look up everything.
Yeah.
You can find out. You don't have to go to a library and look through a card catalog and, beg them to bring you a book that's going to be the wrong book after you've waited half an hour. I found Varieties of Delinquent Youth.
Okay.
Before he got into the Ivy League, he spent 2 years at a home for delinquent youth,
Oh boy.
where he photographed all these guys and divided them again into categories.
Well, I mean, what these books are bringing up for me is, like, to me, books are so trusted. I feel like if someone writes a book, they've thought about their subject matter, they've fire tested it, they've been critical of what they're writing, and then just to understand that, like, no, a book could be a well-articulated deception and even like a crime against people.
Exactly.
Book. Why this book? I'm curious. Out of your big collection, why this guy in particular? What's his name again?
His name
William
is
Sheldon.
William Sheldon.
Like, what is your... What do
I
you
love
find so
what a
fascinating
fraud
about?
he was.
You love what a fraud he was.
I love what a fraud, how he concealed all of his actual intentions, probably his own physical attraction
Right.
to these guys, how he was able to cloak it in science and make the whole world accept it, how he was able to get all of our top institutions where supposedly people are educated, where they know something, to go along with his fraud, to ignore his obvious quackery,
Yeah.
and allow him access to thousands, perhaps,
Including future presidents.
Yeah,
George
like-
Bush, you
yeah.
said, was...
like 50,000 people.
Unreal.
Now, what brought him down in the end is he wanted to follow up the Atlas of Men with the Atlas of Women. And so he was pushing to photograph ever more female students. And the institutions noticed that the women were extremely resistant. They didn't want to be photographed. Their facial expressions were not happy. And parents started to ask why their daughters had to be photographed naked, as we were getting into the 60s.
Yeah.
And as these questions came out, they started to just look at it and go, wait a minute, this guy reads like a total wacko. What's going on? And he was kind of shamed out of it all.
Wow.
And yeah, they, fell out of favor, continued it as much as he could up until his death. He died in his office, still thinking he could do this. But then the institutions have mostly destroyed all the photographs, except for a small quantity of like 20,000 that belong to the Smithsonian.
Oh, geez. So they're just collecting dust somewhere.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's so fascinating. You talking about how quackery is so often related to, like, sexuality.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, the institutions of this country, how much sort of personal pathology can invade these institutions and really throw off the course of a lot of people's lives, and also just be operating under this professional idea, this educational idea, but be totally related to one person's sort of kinks or illnesses, or even maybe not neither of those, just their personal desires.
Yeah, exactly.
Wild.
Huge events throughout history have all been instigated, by one person's aberrant little quirk.
Right.
And they can find a way to cloak it, particularly if they're educated.
Right.
In the right words.
In the right words, and finding the right form of bureaucracy that's just happy someone's doing something and fitting into a slot that they don't really have to worry about. Okay, you have one book over there. I'm feeling the tension. I could see you looking at it.
I have one more book.
Okay.
This book actually came from my dad's library. My dad was also a big collector of this sort of material.
Okay.
And
So it runs in the family.
when he, the last day of his life, he had his new wife bring out a pile of books for me. And yeah, they were all sex books and stuff.
Wow.
So my dad gave me his sex books.
Okay.
Bizba.
Bearing
the Breast's Intriguing Mysteries. This is from 1968. This is quackery at its finest. This guy believed that you could tell anything about a woman by examining her breasts. And it is illustrated with, we got to get to illustrations. Most of it is a glossary, by the way.
Okay.
But he had these kind of horrible drawings of breasts, and he rated them in style and hang, divergence, projection, all these things. And after you go through this, you come up with numbers. So you have U and A and this and that. You put them all together, and then you go back to the giant glossary in the back. This man
was obsessed with breasts.
He was obsessed with misogyny.
And misogyny, there we go.
Because what you get down to in the glossary is a whole bunch of made-up words, all of them negative, to describe women.
Wow.
So there is not a single good characteristic that the breasts will reveal about
so there
a
is
woman.
No good. Okay.
No, we have here acquiescent, disposed to yield to others and to conditions and happenings with an attitude of accepting things as inevitable. Her philosophy is that it's more sensible to yield than to walk home. Acidulant, given to using a sourish outlook and manner to visit a souring influence on others. She exerts her souring influence with words and attitudes, whereas the cursive female has such an influence through mere presence alone. Huffish, tending to be easily offended and given to being petulant and sulky. This one isn't thin-skinned. Her trouble is she wants to be pampered like a child. Homophilous, given to feeling and expressing love and love's passion for another female and to gratifying or attempting to gratify the passion. Don't confuse her with the homosexual, even though desire and passion toward males does not exist in her. It goes on and on and on. So,
And this was a real book. I'm looking at it. It is a real book.
it's a
This
real
was
book.
published.
And there are a lot of copies out there. If you look it up online, they're available everywhere.
Really?
Just a ton of them. It came from a press.
People trying to get rid of them, or no? It was
Hercules Publishing
Hercules, of
Company
course.
in Trenton, New Jersey. I have
Okay.
never found another book published by Hercules
Oh,
Publishing.
really?
I cannot find anything on Timothy Burr, the author.
No kidding.
He came from nowhere. The publishing company came from nowhere. He and the publishing company have faded into obscurity, but the book lives on.
Now, this is 1968.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking the women's liberation movement. We're talking civil rights. We're a different era in feminism. And then suddenly this book appears out of nowhere on Hercules, which is just like this total toxic attempt at over masculinity, whatever, by a man who no one has heard of before or since. Is this a government conspiracy?
Ooh,
Was this
look where you're going.
Was this, or maybe not even government, was this created as a means of, batting back the women's rights movement? I don't know.
I do know, certainly.
Or was this just like a very disturbed man who published his own book?
I cannot tell if it was intended as humor at the time, though there's so much effort put into it. And all the words he made, he put so much effort into it. And the amount of effort in making up so many fake words, all of that shows obsession.
Right.
And I know from doing fetish magazines that few will have that sort of obsession unless they are sexually motivated.
Unless they are truly obsessed.
Yeah, I'm going to say that this guy, he didn't like women. He probably thought women were getting out of their place. He quite likely paid to have this book published and wanted to get it out there and make his fellow misogynists happy. But I can't tell. I have done the research. I have tried, and I can find nothing about this guy.
The mystery of a man the world didn't need. Well, you've just brought in such a fascinating book of sort of male misguidedness into the sexual realms. Books no one will ever come across unless they're looking for them or as fascinated by these subjects as you are. I think this is just, totally unique. I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while. There's a lot to unpack. I've been interested. I've been curious. I've laughed. I've been disturbed. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's, what else is there to say but sort of fascinating and just a total curlicue in the world that would otherwise be hidden.
And this is, a tiny, tiny part of my library.
Wow. Yeah, and it just makes me think about what people occupy themselves with during the course of their lives and what some people's obsessions are on this one life that we know we have, and their academic obsessions, their creative obsessions, and just sort of lets me understand that, we're all operating under our own spell of folly, human folly, and our mysterious motivations that when looked at 40 years later, 100 years later, two people in a room are going to be astounded by in their sort of like just like confounding I don't know. I don't even have the words for it. Yeah, you really threw me for a loop with this one.
And as I said, what it brings home to me is humans are just these flawed creatures. They're very sexually driven. You know, you have to remember that our closest animal relatives are the bonobos.
Right.
They're not the chimps. The chimps are like, they're like the warring cousins.
Yeah.
They're just brutal and rough, and they'll rip your face off. The bonobos are the negotiators, where the females, when they want food, they just offer sex to the males. That they have lots and lots of same-sex sex within the bonobos. They are sexually driven. And humans came out of this kind of in the same way. You know, we're one of the very few creatures that have coitus out of season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have coitus just for pleasure.
Right.
And once animals begin having coitus just for pleasure, it's kind of hard to back away from pleasure. It's kind of hard not to involve pleasure in every part of your life. I mean, I'm a hedonist. You know, I like to pursue pleasure, but I want everyone else to be able to pursue pleasure too, and I don't want my pleasure to hurt anyone else's pleasure. A lot of humans are just pursuing pleasure, and the easiest pleasure for everyone is the one that's within yourself, you know, your orgasmic ability. We just need to be more honest about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hearing you say that, it's like we're bonobos pretending to be chimps, and that's where a lot of the problem comes. And it's because some of us want all the bananas and don't want to share them with the rest of the gang. Somewhere along the way, we got infected with the chimpanzee mentality or whatever. But yeah, no, I'm with you, and I've just really appreciated listening to you. I think you have a fascinating outlook, and obviously this is a lifetime of work and interest, and yeah, I just can't thank you enough for coming on and walking us through some of these.
And thank you for having me. I followed you on TikTok first. That's where I discovered you, and you know, I could see that you were an unusual TikTok content provider, and that a lot of people probably don't understand you and your motivations. I don't think I totally do either, but I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And yeah, Dian Hanson, look up her work with Taschen. It is adult themed, but it's fine art, even if it wasn't, but it is.
Hey, I also did the giant 2-volume Arnold Schwarzenegger book. So
right.
Yeah,
I saw that. The Taschen bookstore is down the street from where we're recording this too, and I'll come in early on my bicycle and pop in there. And these books are just so beautiful. They're so articulate and well thought through. The fact that you say you've done 60 or 70 of them, that's, I mean, as someone who like struggled to release a little 80-page poetry book with no photos, I'm in awe, and yeah, I admire what you do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for that Little Lebowski movie starring you.
Yeah, well, if the Coen brothers are listening, I'm willing to play the Big Lebowski's son, his middle-aged son. So, anytime, really. Yeah, I'll give you my number. Just find me. TikTok. All right, Dian Hanson,
Cool.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Happy reading. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.